Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Stone Genius. My name's Ro, I'm the Stone Genius. You know me, I'm often stoned, I'm always a genius. Today was a day off, so I am stoned. And I should really not even say often. I should just say always stoned, always a genius. It just makes more sense. And otherwise, I really believe I'm lying to you, the audience, and I don't want to. I will lie to you, but not about something stupid like that. I'm really excited today. We have a guest on the show. If you read the title of what you're listening to, you would have already known that. So I'm going to welcome this person to the show. This is Brandon Schexnayder. Brandon is the host and producer of the Southern Gothic podcast, which we will talk about on this show, has done many other things in the audio engineering and other things. Hey, welcome to the show, Brandon.
Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So, I love, we got connected a certain way, and when I read kind of what you did, and then I listened to some of the podcasts, it really interests me because I always think those type of stories are great, and they're very they're and the way you do them is great. So I just want to say I'm very glad that you're on the podcast.
Oh, I appreciate it. Definitely, yeah.
So looking at your bio that I see, you had done some audio engineer work for some big names like George Strait and Miranda Lambert, and now you are doing a podcast, and then you do some freelance editing and producing for other shows. What's easier, the podcast field or dealing with superstars?
Oh, I was really lucky. Most of my career up on Music Row up there, I worked with some great people, so it was not that hard at all. But I definitely, that previous kind of career of working in music and making albums and stuff like that, it was a lot of time away from home.
Right.
So, it was definitely a lot of time just living in that studio and all. That world's changed a little bit. So a lot of my friends that are still doing it, they're working out of the house now. But, that's the upside. Is I get to be home more. I get to have a little more balanced life, get to do some stuff like that. But at the same time, I mean, this world of podcasting, it's entrepreneurial, man. It is the Wild West, and it is definitely something where you are working one hand as a creative person, and then the next day you're trying to cut deals or make deals and grow.
Yeah.
So it's definitely it's been different. It's worked different parts of my brain. I'm glad I did as much as I did in music, so I don't regret pivoting.
So did you think it was going to be easier because of the background you were coming from? Did you think that it was going to be easier than what it is? Is it just as challenging as you thought, or is it more challenging once you got into podcasting?
I think it was different. So I think I knew that if I came over, I could make something that sounded up to par right out of the gate.
Right.
I knew that if I moved over here, I wasn't afraid of any of the technology. I know a lot of folks, when they start a show, they've got their strength. Maybe it's their idea, maybe it's their business background, maybe it's whatever it might be. And they're having to start from scratch with understanding what the tech is and the microphone. And they've got this whole learning curve. And, and I knew how to make something. I knew how to make it. I knew what it was going to be. I knew what the level that I was going to expect to come out of it, how to get that MP3 out at the end, and get it. So I didn't have that learning curve. So, I definitely, I thought it would move a little faster. I think you always think that if I can do something better, then it's going to take off.
Right.
Not that I thought it would be wildfire. I didn't think it was going to be number one on the charts or anything, but
like number 2 or 3 was doable on the chart.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely thought it would move up faster. It took about, I think it was year 3 when we broke into like the top 25 history podcast.
Right.
So it took about 3 years, and maybe I thought it would be like 2,
Right.
you know,
Well, and that
something
is
like
one
that. Yeah.
thing that I wanted to do podcasting, just long conversation type of interviews. And I was getting ready to start at the end of 2019. And then when COVID hit, people started working from home. The equipment that I wanted was non-existent at that point. Whoever had it, previously, they had sold out. So I had to wait, probably a good, I'm trying to think of when. I've been doing this for 2 years now myself, but I had to wait. But I was much like you. You knew that you could put out something quality. I knew I had to, which is why I don't do video. Eventually, I will do video, but I came out of photography and video. That was the field that I was in. And I used to have people that would come to me and they'd be like, heard you do a podcast. I'm wanting to start a video podcast and, I need to get everything. And my first question would be, what's your budget? They'd be like, I got like $500.
Right.
And I would just be like, I can't, you can do it, but you have to understand that it's not what you're used to seeing finished videos of people that have, put hundreds of videos out and learned and grown. And so it would always amaze me. I would get that rare customer that they would be like, I don't have whatever it needs to be, I'll spend. And so we would go and I wouldn't try to gouge them, but it'd be, easily $9,000 I could get them to spend, and they would be very happy with that setup.
Absolutely, yeah.
But that's why I haven't done video is I don't want to learn that. I know that I could learn how to edit video, but that is not my strength. So why bother? Someone could do it much more efficiently.
Yeah. I think the thing that most people don't realize when they make podcasts is that you got to scale it somehow.
Right.
So like, this isn't like when we'd make an album for somebody, you had a budget that would kind of stop you. But at the end of the day, if it was somebody like George Strait, he could make that album for 3 years if he really wanted to. Right. He could just go and polish this thing, and he puts this one thing out and it's done. But like this podcast's got to come out every, depending on how often I do mine every other week. Every 2 weeks I got to put something out. That means every 2 weeks I got to have a topic. I've got to have research. I've got to have it voiced over, edited, sound design, all this stuff.
So
it's all got to get done in 2 weeks.
So did you enter going, hey, I'm going to do this every other week, or was that something after doing it you found? Because I have found that the sweet spot for my shows is about an hour and a half in length and 3 times a week. That's when, for whatever reason, if I do 2 shows a week, it seems like I'll lose half the viewers, even though it's only one less show. So, or not viewers, but listeners. So, it's just difficult.
It's dependent on the audience. And that's what's wonderful about podcasting too, is and even in talking at scale. So you had to make a system to get 3 shows out.
Right.
Like you found the sweet spot, and then you have to find a way to get that done with whatever other work, whatever other family life, whatever other things you're doing in your life. You have to find a way to get those 3 shows out because that those 3 are the best. I kind of, when I came to it and started it, I knew how much research would be involved in ours. I knew how much I was doing at that point in time. I knew how much it would take production wise. I still don't actually. It hasn't even come out yet, this episode, but I actually hired a writer for the first time to write something after 5 years.
Was its name Chat GPT?
No.
Okay.
No, actually, I hired a real person.
Okay.
Real. Like, I've used Chat GPT to help. Certainly that's been a cool asset. We can go down that rabbit hole even if you want. But I knew that it was going to take. This could take a week to research, and then this is going to take a week to produce it.
Right.
On whatever other schedule of whatever of their life and other things. And so that mine was kind of set up that way. It hasn't struggled too much because a lot of the folks that I'm in competition with in my world and my genre either do seasonal things where they might put a 10 episode run out, or they
Right.
might do something of that nature. So my audience in this kind of niche wasn't too far off. I'm a narrative show, so I'm sitting in front of a microphone by myself and it's scripted.
Well, and
So it's got a different vibe.
one thing that I really like enjoyed about your podcast are just the titles as well. Like a couple of the more recent ones were the hoof prints of Bath, and then
Yeah,
the Crybaby Bridge of Anderson County. And it's funny because I try to use somewhat creative titles for shows that don't have a guest. Because when I do have a guest, what happens is invariably I will have people that follow those guests. And so they'll come to listen specifically to that guest and then they'll start poking around. Is there anything else? Would I be interested in listening to
right.
any other episodes? And so it's funny because the ones that get listened to, I'll just see the title and I'm almost positive that someone was like, I just let me check this one out real quick. But I did love the titles that you have on your shows as well.
Yeah. Well, they're not as creative as they could be. I mean, they're pretty. They're kind of referencing what some of the legends are called anyway. But I had gone through a whole thing even where, looking into SEO and stuff like that, and trying to make stuff SEO friendly, and and there was like a little bit of a level of it, but looking in general, where I was at, it kind of was. Yeah, they just kind of they are what they are.
Right.
Right. This is the creepy folklore, and this is what it ends up being.
Right. And so I guess we should
I got
explain
too
to
busy.
everyone also that your podcast, Southern Gothic, is about basically spooky stories from around the South for the most part, correct?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's dark history, old folklore, old legends, some historic true crime,
So
some
what
stuff
when
like
you
that. So
decided to do a podcast and you were thinking of a theme, because people will still ask me, they'll go, "What's your theme?" I go, "I don't have one." But what made
yeah.
you? I mean, so you've narrowed it down. You have a niche. Did you always have an interest in this type of material? Was it, or did something else kind of push you, or maybe even monetarily? Like, hey, this
Yeah.
may be a easy one to make money with.
Well, it's definitely something that interests me. Like I'm New Orleans born and raised, so I kind of came into this whole like being into like old ghost stories, and grew up kind of in that environment, being really
So when you
interested
say you grew
in
up in
stuff
that,
like
like
that.
how
So
much of it, like really? So I had a cousin that had moved to New Orleans and
hmm
They had an apartment in somewhere downtown, old building, high rise downtown, and
yeah,
they used to say it was haunted, but they really wouldn't ever get into it. And then they moved up to the Northeast. Um,
yeah.
so when you said that, kind of like growing up, you were surrounded by it. Was it just like everyone knew that's a spooky place, or there were just spooky legends that seemed to be I grew up in the
Yeah.
suburbs, so there's nothing. The
Right.
spookiest thing about the suburbs are the neighbors, and so yeah,
Huh. Yeah.
yeah. So I
Yeah.
mean, I didn't really.
It's
There
a
were
vibe
there
thing.
weren't any like horror stories or things going
Right.
on in the suburbs. So when you were growing up, what surrounded you like that?
Sure. It's a vibe thing, really.
Okay.
It's a place that there's just such deep history there. You knew you're from a place. You go on vacation somewhere else, and you knew how distinctively different where you're from is different. You
Right.
know, so you're kind of there. There's definitely. Everything's historic and old.
Right.
You wrap up in that it is a very Catholic city. So it's very very wrapped in that kind of old world ritual even look.
Right.
You throw in there, my teenage years, or my maybe even a little younger then, was wrapped up in Anne Rice, the Interview with the Vampire movie coming out,
Right.
really topping that off. I actually, my parents were into genealogy and very deep into genealogy back before the internet, so we were at cemeteries all the time. So they used to
I was
bring us
gonna
out
say,
to,
how would you
we'd be
look that
traveling
shit
around.
up before the internet? Like
Yeah, yeah, I
I'm
do.
55 and I'm not a huge technology. I don't really care that much about technology. Like if it disappeared, I would. My Xbox, I want. Other than that, I'm pretty good at it. I mean, I
Huh.
don't. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so I don't know. So they were into genealogy and they were doing that pre-internet days. That's crazy. So they had to go to
Yeah,
like
yeah.
cemeteries and see families and how they were associated then.
Oh yeah, yeah. You'd go out to all these old churches out in the country, right? And just up and down the river up there, and yeah, taking pictures of tombstones. You know, might show people were together. Might be visiting some of those churches. Might have records. You know, go to some old parish libraries, stuff like that. Spend a lot of time in, libraries and kind of their like microfilm and microfiche rooms and stuff like that. So, they kind of had that. They kind of had that vibe of I'm sure that played into it some, and I
So
say all of this without even really saying like, I mean, I didn't really experience straight up like I didn't live in a haunted house or something like that. Like a lot of folks that do this, they kind of start with.
right. So did your parents ask you to go with them? Did they tell you to go with them, or did you ask them if you could go?
Oh man, we got drugged, man. It was we were brought. Well, I mean, I remember being a little kid going to cemeteries. I
So
mean, I remember like 8 years old out there in that heat and humidity down there out in the cemeteries, walking around when my dad looks for somebody.
and
Yeah.
when I first hear you say that, I'm like, that's such a strange upbringing. But my family grew up in the church. Like my grandfather was a minister. My grandmother always played the organ in the church. My mom was generally the like children's ministry, and then my dad, for a long time before he went back to being a pharmacist, was a business administrator. And they were always like really, really old churches, and we would run around in the
Yeah.
dark and everything. And I was trying to think as we're leading up to talk or talk tonight is, did I ever experience anything? And I can't really say that I did. I think that I had chills, but I think that was just because I was, a kid in single digits in the 70s, and I just didn't have, I was afraid of the dark probably. So that probably led more into it than actually something being there. But when I think about it now,
Right.
all
Yeah.
those old churches, all the funerals and stuff that they have, if something was going to be haunted, a church wouldn't be a bad place to be haunted. Although I don't know if the laws of hauntings allows a church premises. See, I don't know. So, so
You're saying that, and honestly, I don't even know if I can think of any stories of a haunted church.
yeah, I
As
mean,
many stories as I've collected. I mean, the graveyards always are.
yes.
Of course, they always are. But
So
now
have
that
you
you're
ever
saying
heard
that,
of
that's it.
have you ever heard of Stoll Cemetery? I believe that's what it's called. It's in Kansas. I think it's between Lawrence and Topeka on a little highway. And they say that the gates to hell are there, and like they have a police
I have
presence.
totally heard of that. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a big deal here, and I've driven by it down that highway a few times, and it's funny because I feel like creepy driving up to it, but then when I drive through it, it's like, it's nothing. It's almost like the anticipation is what's kind of building in me, and I'm feeling more than anything else as I drive through it.
Yeah. I've been to a lot of places where I felt similar. I think if a lot of people, man, people ask about ghost hunting. I get so many questions about ghost hunting all the time and about going to haunted places. And I tell people, man, if you really are into it at the same time, you don't need to go to one of these famous places. It's almost more all the aura around it. Like you could drive around your neighborhood. There's gonna be an old house. There's gonna be something there
Right.
that you you can go to. You don't have to go to these big ones because a lot of times it's almost commercialized scare at this point. It's a tourist scare. It's almost more just this thing. And like you're saying, you get there and you feel a little let down. It just looks old, and that's it.
I'm trying to remember the name of the hotel in downtown Denver. But it's supposedly a very haunted, one of the most haunted places. And in downtown Denver, they used to, at least pre-pandemic, do like ghost tours. And they would always go
Uh-huh.
through this hotel, and we would stay there in downtown Denver. And one night they were doing the ghost tour, and they bring them in, and they're in there for like 10 or 15 minutes. And I asked the person behind the desk, which was up on the second level where I was, I go, do you guys have a sheet? And they go, oh, yes, sir. And they're like thinking that something happened. We need a sheet for it. So they brought me a sheet, and I put the sheet over my head. And so I walked over to the corner, and as they're down there on the first level giving this ghost tour, I moved like 4 feet to the right so that I could be seen in my sheet. And I moved back, and I took the sheet off and just went about my day. I thought it was, because everyone was like, ooh, and you could hear little bits of chatter with it. And then they thought it was part of it. And they were like, no, there is nothing here. There's nothing part of it. It was just interesting. But I also thought it was interesting because we were there for so many nights. How many people go on those tours? So
Yeah,
there's a
big
huge
business.
draw and interest to that, which I totally get.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically at this point, a lot of these historic places turn to this as like an income stream,
Right.
and they turn to that as a way to renovate and to fix things up. But I know the way that I look at it even is you can see the changes in ghost stories. Like if there's some old story from like 1850 or something, you can see how it evolves over time. And back in the 80s, there was a big shift in the way we told ghost stories. And a lot of that came out because of like haunted bed and breakfasts and plantations, and starting to do things of that nature, starting to you're trying to attract people there for these ghost tours.
Right.
And it almost impacted the way we even told stories and kind of added new stories. And it's absolutely all over the place here in Tennessee. There are these historic Civil War things that just that's how they're funding fixing it up, how they're doing the restoration renovation. So yeah, it's definitely a thing unto itself for sure.
Yeah. And, it's funny that you mention that because I went, and this is probably 15, 16 years ago, I had to go to a meeting in Savannah. And the only thing I remember some food and like eating at places, but most of what I remember is haunted this, haunted that, tour this, tour that. Because wherever I was staying in that part of Savannah downtown or whatever it's called for this meeting, it seemed that, like you say, it was very much geared, and that was 15, 16 years ago. And it was very much geared like that. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Have you experienced something yourself that you just can't explain?
I mean, I've had a lot of small things. I don't have a large story like some people do. I haven't really been through, where again, I didn't grow up in a haunted house or something. I didn't kind of have something like that. Most people, what they tell me most people I know in this kind of field that I'm in, and most people that are really hardcore ghost hunters and all, they always say they came to it one of two ways, right? They either grew up in a haunted house or they had some type of experience with like a family member after they passed. That seems to be like the two main kind of like avenues into it. And I didn't have either one of those.
Right.
So I didn't kind of get into it that way. So I've experienced stuff, but it's like the verdict's still out of it's unexplainable. I don't
So
know what it is.
what was the incident where the verdict is out?
Sure. Well, so I do this. They give ghost tours down here. I'm right outside of Nashville in this town called Franklin, and this Franklin it's a Civil War town basically. There's an immense battle here right at the end of the war where it was 20,000 people from the north, 20 from the south, all converged right here in this little town. 10,000 people died, went missing, or were wounded in a period of like 5 hours. Okay. Wow. So massive casualties. We're talking, this is like 20 times the amount of people that are injured at this point and dead than even lived in this town when it happened. Right.
Right.
So just immense, Anyway, there's one of our spots here that is on one of the big famous, the big main ghost tour spot is this house that it's called Cherry Manor, and it is It's just this old house from 1820, uh, built by a rich dude, was in their family for years and years and years. And the thing about it though is that the story is or this house, I mean, is everybody talks about. This is like the scary one. This is the one where people take pictures of it, and they see pictures in the windows of people. They constantly see. They always say it's this kind of like malevolent girl or something looking out of the window at you, and people talk about going in there and they don't feel upset and feel uneasy and they leave. And anyway, it's a spot that's got all this stuff attached to it, and people talk about it. It's like the last chapter in the ghost book for Franklin, that kind of place.
Right.
And it feels kind of hooey and kind of hokey at first, but but that's the place where I actually think like I felt the most uncomfortable at one point. There's no story attached to it. For a place that's as haunted as that, you don't get a lot of those places without like a really firm story of
Right. Like
John
Smith. Yeah.
here.
Right. Huh.
And this one's just completely devoid of it. It's got a couple spirits that people talk about. They've got like some conjecture about it, about this. There was a woman who lived here, a girl who lived here that at one point there was a college for women, like a high school boarding school here, and it burned down and it was arson. And that's factually true. And then these girls came and lived in this house. And that girl is the spirit. But aside from that, there's no explanation as to why so many people feel so upset at it. And and I've just had a few times where I've gone out there and gone up to that spot, and just it's less an experience visualizing something or seeing something or seeing like a shadow person or playing with an EMF reader. And it was more of just a really upsetting. You feel like this place is just wrong.
And
I don't quite know how to describe it.
And did you know at that time that it was because of your like geographic location, or were you like, wow, I don't understand why my stomach's this upset? Or were you like, it was a feeling like, not dread may not be the right word, but something was it more something amiss, or was it more of a physical reaction that you had?
It was more physical. That one. Dread is kind of, I think dread's not that off of a word for it.
Okay.
It's definitely more of a physical, like a fight or flight type feeling, maybe.
Okay.
I did know what it was.
Okay.
And I had been there before, so like I didn't expect it. And
so you hadn't had it at your previous visit. You didn't have that same feeling.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And I mean, it's something, I hear that sometimes. I went up to, Waverly Hills Sanatorium up in Louisville, and it's like a super famous haunted place.
Yes.
I told you not to about that. It's super. I mean, all the ghosted, everybody has done ghost hunts there. And, and my girlfriend and I went and stayed, did a 12 o'clock, midnight to 6 a.m. thing there with a group of people. And, this ghost, there's so many people running around. It's hard to, like it's,
right.
You're not really. It's almost more fun.
Were any of those people assholes, right? Like trying to be like, ooh, oh, I think I heard him.
No, this is like if you're going. It was in the middle of December, so it's like 25 degrees,
Eesh.
And it's like we're there from 12 to 6 in the morning in this abandoned hospital. I mean, we were there with some hardcore nerds.
Yeah. So
these were guys. They were in there. They were in it to win it, man.
You would have lost me at 25 degrees. You could have come up and said, Ro, you are 100% guaranteed to see a ghost. You can touch a ghost. You can interact with an actual ghost. And I'll be like, yeah, but it's 25 degrees. I'd be like, no. I'll go, if they'll see me in the summertime, I will definitely do this. This sounds like a lot of fun. But right now, I'm just going to have to hold off because of the temperature. I'm sorry. Yeah.
We were there. We were packaged up for sure. We had we had the foot warmers, everything. We bailed at 4:30. We made it to 4:30. We didn't stay all the way just because of the cold. But
did any of those other people call you and be like, "Oh, right after you left, the headless dude showed up"?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, but that's the thing is you walk around there and you kind of have folks doing what I would call like trying to get evidence, right? Guys that got like the little meters, the little
geez.
things, you kind of walk into a room and, there's a couple guys around there like, oh man, like check this out, and whatever. And it's just kind of like the ghost shows on TV,
Yeah.
a little too, but man, we hit this one point, we kind of, I enjoy doing it, and I don't really pull out all the tools and stuff. I'm not that kind of person that goes to these
Do you
places.
have the
Like to
tools
sit.
if you needed to pull them out?
I mean, I have like an EMF reader and a little spirit box, but
Well, hold
honestly,
on.
I've never.
You say that matter of factly, like like everyone just
You
has
don't talk to a lot of
EMF.
ghost
You're
people.
like, I got an EMF
Yeah,
and a spirit box, and then you just keep
yeah.
talking along.
You want to
So
know what they are?
yeah,
Okay,
because
all right.
I think an EMF is like the electromagnetic something or other. I
Yeah,
feel as a
yeah, yeah.
genius I should know more about this maybe, but I've seen it on the shows. It's a beep beep beep
Yeah.
boop 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 boop. And the faster I think, if you have a one that goes
Yeah,
boop
yeah,
boop
yeah.
boop, the faster the boops, the more the I guess the spirit is closer the faster. So, but what is
Yeah,
a
I mean
spirit
that's
box?
the
Because
idea.
immediately the only thing I can think of as spirit box is like a slang for the things that they used in Ghostbusters. The little thing they would slide on the floor and it'd open
Oh,
up and get
yeah,
the
yeah.
ghost. That's what I'm
It's less
picturing as a.
cool.
Oh, it's not that cool. Hold on, I got a sound for
It's
that.
less cool.
Okay, so
Yeah.
what is a spirit box then?
All right. So what you have is it's like a little radio, okay? And what it does is it's a radio that flips through stations at a very high speed. Okay, so it's just
Uh huh.
and what supposedly the way that it's supposed to work is that that rate of frequency allows you to hear a voice. That rate of frequency can be manipulated. So what you'll see on like a TV show or something, they call it the Estes method, okay? Where you'll see somebody will put on headphones and they will be listening to this spirit box kind of flip through radio stations, right? And then you have somebody else who'll be talking to, the spirit, right? So be asking questions or something. And this person with headphones doesn't hear what the questions are, but every time they hear some words or something, they'll answer. Okay, and this is so it's meant to be like this blind kind of concept here. So it's become really popular in ghost hunting circles because it's a way that folks believe you can talk to it. So that's one of the tools
I am
that
going
a
to
lot of people
next
use.
time
Really
we're at a
popular.
function with other couples, I'm going to have my wife utter the phrase, "Ro, is that a spirit box in your pocket, or are you just happy to see me?" And then we're not going to explain the comment because she's
Yeah.
referencing the pocket. People aren't going to ask, and we're just going to leave. And they'll be like, "Hold on, what? Hold on, what spirit? Hold on, pocket," and it will just confuse the shit out of them. I have learned
Yeah.
something
Well,
new.
I mean,
I'm excited about that. The spirit box.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's I tell people like if you what depending on how you believe in what you do, I mean a lot of the ghost hunting tools are they're really valuable pieces of equipment. That EMF reader, it gets near your cell phone, it's going off.
Right.
Like it's going up there. So it's all touch and go. But yeah, that spirit box thing has gotten really popular. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about going out with someone that has their EMF reader and I put a prostate massager in it. And every time they wand back and forth, they get to my ass and they're like, huh. Okay. Yeah. So that's how much I've been smoking so far today. Oh, so my personality gets me in trouble sometimes because people won't, like if I say something, they'll think it's a joke when it's not. Because I talk about our first house that we lived in when we moved back to Kansas City. We were in a suburb and it was just this branch. I mean, it was, geez, I don't know, maybe 10 years old at the time the house was. So it's not like it didn't have a history. It wasn't, to my knowledge, it was not built on sacred ground or anything. But we used to have this problem with the lights, and this is back in the 90s, before like smart lights. like right now, if the power goes out and you have, like we have all of our lights are smart lights. And if the power goes out and the power comes back on, all the lights come back on, like at full strength. So what would happen is I am very anal about checking doors and the garage door and making sure that looking in the garage, make sure that lights aren't on in the car, that the garage door's down, checking everything, making sure everything's out and off before I go to bed. And for some reason, well, after we first moved in, I started hearing voices in the morning. I'd have to get up about 4 every morning, and I was hearing children's voices. And it sounded like it was coming from outside. I couldn't hear what they were saying. It just sounded like children's pitch, and they were talking, but I couldn't understand what they were saying. And I didn't want to tell my wife because I thought she would freak out about it because she generally does not handle that type of unknown situation very well. So I kind of kept it to myself. And then so I never mentioned that. And then when she would go out of town. Our oldest was young at the time. She would go back to visit her parents with our child, and I would have to stay in town for work. And I would go to bed at night, and all the lights would be out, and then every single light would be on. The dog would give a quick growl, and then I would wake up, and every single light would be on in the house. Like every switch was in the up position. Even lamps that had the little pull things back in the day, everything was on.
Yeah.
And it was never, there was nothing bad. I never saw like a shadow. I never caught them being turned on. But I do remember once I turned every light off in the house. I go back and lay down. And we've always had Dobermans, and I hear this. And I open my eyes, every light's on again. And I just remember yelling, "Come on, I need to sleep." So I just pulled the blanket over. I mean, I was just like, you know what? Maybe they'll find out when it doesn't bother me, they'll turn them all back off. So I think I just covered my head. But I never felt dread. I never felt anything. But when I tell people that story, everyone's like, okay, whatever. And then all Bobby says is, yeah, no, it's true. And they're like, oh, really? Tell us more. So, but she heard the voices too, and she just didn't know how to tell me because she was hearing them later. So I was hearing them like at 4 a.m. She was hearing them like at 6 a.m. and literally thought there were street kids out there. Hoodlums, I believe. Punks may have been the term that she used. But that's the only thing that we've ever kind of encountered. I mean, it's at least that's all I've ever encountered. I've never, the apartment, we downsized, we moved into an apartment. When we moved into this apartment complex, it's very small. Many of the residents have been here 20 plus years. When we're told that most people, when they move out of here, they move out feet first, meaning they die, and that's how they move out.
Yeah.
And literally like 2 months into it, our youngest child was helping this older lady that lives in the apartment complex, like carry her groceries in and stuff and help her run errands and do things for her. Yeah, she just passed away in her apartment. No one knew for like a week. Yeah. So, but I've never had anything at the apartment. One day I thought I saw like a shadow figure go through the living room, but I just thought it was odd because I literally had watched like an Ancient Aliens or one of those shows that was talked about shadow figures, and I was super high. So I did the real basic math and said, me watching that show plus the amount of marijuana that I've consumed, I'm going to lead myself to believe I did not actually see a shadow figure. And I've never seen it since. So,
yeah.
You
never know. It might put your brain in a space where it can accept it.
Well, yeah, and so I had someone else on the program that was talking about the afterlife, being able to communicate with spirits in the afterlife. And I thought a very good talk. I learned a lot more than I guess I thought I was going into it. It was very interesting, but I don't think I just, to me, if a spirit, I just think that spirits are going to have better things to do. Now, if they're tied to like a house, like you said, like you grew up in a haunted house, the home is haunted and the spirit can't leave there. I get them. They've been there for 200 years. They're fucking with furniture and stuff. I get that. But in other instances, I don't know where I was going with that, but I just with like
No. I understand what you're saying. You're saying basically like, why are you here? Why would you
right,
hang
like
out with me?
so for yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So with that, I was like she was saying that her father was like communicating to her, like saying something about a like I think it was a sofa, like a couch, because they were like a psychologist or someone that used a sofa like that. And my thing is, if you can communicate a couch, why can't you just fucking say couch? And why is that what you're talking? I mean, it just seems like none of the conversations, it just seems like if people at some point are having that communication or interaction, it just seems like they're kind of benign. It just seems like there needs to be more substance if we're interacting with another realm.
I'll give you that. I think I'm somewhere on the same level. I mean, that's what, when I go to places, why I don't like using that stuff.
Yeah.
Because I think at the end of the day, if you're going to experience something, I want to see something, man.
Right.
I don't want to go. I don't want to go to the most famous sanatorium or whatever, and play with my phone and talk to the air.
Right.
I mean, I'm going because I want to experience something. But
would you
it's
rather?
funny, you're saying that though. What you got?
Well, I was just gonna say, would you rather go to a place and not know the history? Like whether it was haunted, not haunted, what the hauntings may have been, so that you would have your own experience, as opposed to, oh, well, most people see a headless apparition or what, where not
Right.
leading the witness, but oh, well, there's some baseline that now you have to work with because oh, well, I didn't see a headless apparition. I saw one that had where it's kind of like a similar story. Or would you rather just be somewhere and you either feel something or you don't?
Yeah. I mean, I think the way my interest is, I'm more interested in the building itself anyway. So I usually like to know a bit about the history of the building and really understand it. Because what my interest lies in normally is like the power of that place.
Right.
Of going somewhere, going into this old home. Like I went to McPike Mansion in St. Louis, or outside of St. Louis, and it's condemned now basically. It was just this beautiful mansion that is just falling apart, and you kind of go in there and a little bit about the history of it. And I don't know if we had an experience that night. I didn't really. It was, again, this is one of those things that was with a crowd, but going to that place and standing in that living room where you look up and you see like the beautiful crown molding that's like basically falling off the wall at this point, and you can see the level of extravagance and feel like there's some type of connection that you kind of get when you go to somewhere and just realize this has been here for 150 years, and if these walls could talk, whether it's paranormal or not, what's here? And that's more what my interest kind of lends to, rather than the straight up going and trying to find the headless guy.
Right. And now that you mention that, and that's one thing that I love talking to experts or people that are passionate about their field, is it helps me to connect things that I haven't really thought of, because I haven't really, when I think about ghosts or the afterlife, that I understand that we're energy. So I'm not saying, because I've always said as a Christian, I'm always like, the afterlife is either going to be amazing or it's going to be nothing. I'm not exactly sure which one. But I think those are pretty much the two options. I have heard someone say that we're going to have jobs in the afterlife. I hope that's not the case, because if karma is any part of this, I am going to have just a shitty ass job, probably a retail job. That's what I'll have in the afterlife, if that's the case. But when when I generally think about hauntings and things, I dismiss it a little more because I have not, when I've been at a place that has been advertised or indicated that it has a history of hauntings, that I generally don't feel anything. But I will tell you that in a different way, and it's not that I'm trying to feel ghosts or anything, but like Kansas City has an amazing Union Station. I actually think that it was built prior to New York State Union Station. If I'm not, I don't know where I know this information, but I'm almost positive that Kansas City Union Station was built prior to. It has this grand, amazing hall. In fact, back in the 80s when I was in my teen years, we would go down there before they renovated it. You could basically break in. You didn't have to break anything to get in. You would get in, as pigeons and hobos is what kind of inundated that. But now that they've cleaned that up, we travel by train a lot. So the Amtrak still goes out of there, but it doesn't leave out of the Grand Hall. And the Grand Hall is just amazing. I don't know how tall the ceilings are. They've had FBI shootouts back in the 30s or 40s out in front where the bullet holes are still. And sometimes I just go stand in there where we're waiting for a train, and I may be the only one in this Grand Hall that had, hundreds of people waiting for trains back in the grand days of train where everything came through Kansas City. And I sometimes just try to feel that energy of all those people moving around. And it's not like but now that I think about it, I'm technically trying to feel ghost, but I've never, until you're talking and we're talking about the energy and, the building and the history of it, I never really compared that because I'm trying to feel the energy of the people that are here before. And if you get deeper into that, those people are now dead. So if I'm feeling their energy, then they might be ghosts. You know what I mean? But I try to do that. And I think about, as a Christian, that I've always wanted to go to Jerusalem. I think that would be an amazing trip. And part of it is I just want to feel that. Whether everything is true or not, just feel the energy that was once there. And I think that's what hauntings can be, or maybe they're mistaken. That is actually what it is, and it may be mistaken, or I have no idea. But have you ever thought about it in that way? Have you ever thought about just feeling the energy of a place, but not really framing it in the mindset of ghost or the afterlife or necessarily?
That's almost more what I tend to look at a lot when I do go to places. I feel like you can get that. I feel like just going and shutting your eyes. If you were to go and you walk on this battlefield over here, it's about a mile away, and you go and you stand there and you really stop and just kind of like meditate in on it, close your eyes for a minute and just kind of, feel where you're at and look at it that way. I don't see how you can't kind of commune with that in some way. And I think that's typically where I like to start with it when I go to a place and to kind of, what was here, what's important about it, and imagine all the things that are here, and then, kind of feel out. And, maybe there's more of a ghostly experience, of a paranormal experience that could add on to that and be a little more than that, which would be fantastic. It would be wonderful to experience that. But, I always do start with that. And like I was saying, even with going to Waverly, that was our intention when we went there before our spirit box talk, right? That's what we really tried to do was we tried to go in there and walk around and go sit, and you go in this wing that was the children's wing and just like feel what's going on there, and maybe we're going to experience more, maybe we're not, but if we do have one, it's going to be a pure experience, instead of something really fun and stuff. So it's.
And I try to incorporate everything that I think would be going on, like the sounds because generally where I've been, I'm not going to hear a sound I probably have not heard before or something. So, I can put myself in its situation and be like, I could go out, I could go to an empty baseball stadium, but imagine what the sound of the crowd is like, or imagine the smell of the
Exactly.
food of that's been there before, because I can experience, and makes it more real and can tie that in. Because I think about that every once in a while. There's Here in Kansas City, we literally grew up, our house was right behind a mall. There was like a green space in between our house and the mall, and then you'd walk through this green space, heavy green space, and then you'd be at the mall. So I spent a lot of time there, and the mall is completely gone. And things are starting to go up, like individual standalone restaurants and different things on the spot. But one day I had to drive through there, what's now a parking lot, to go to this business that's there. And I kind of, as I was driving slow, I was trying to imagine where I was in the mall. And then I was trying to imagine, all that went on there. Because I do know that people died in that mall. There was, heart attack, not like anything violent that I'm aware of, but like heart attacks and things like that happen.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of energy, but it was weird because I would like stop the car and I'd kind of look around and I'd see the shape of the train and I'd be like, okay, well, I would have been on the second level and this is where these stores would have been. I just always try to find that energy because I think that is fun. And like you said, if it led to something more, that would just be amazing too.
Yeah. That's 100%. Yeah.
So what is the weirdest thing doing this? Maybe not weirdest, maybe most unexpected thing that has happened to you since starting this podcast?
Oh man. You know, it's in, we have this one story that it seems like every time we like really go and promote it or tell it, something good happens. So this is my weird paranormal, right? Where we got this one story that we tell about this woman who was supposedly a voodoo priestess, and she lived out in the swamp outside of New Orleans, and lived out there, and they say that she cursed this small town in southeastern Louisiana out in the swamp and said, when I die, I'm going to take the whole town with me. And, there's a lot deeper to the story and all. And eventually, so the town gets afraid. They hear, she's telling them that she's going to destroy the town after she dies. And then a few days after she actually dies, this giant hurricane comes through southeastern Louisiana in 1915, and over 200 people die in Louisiana that day from this hurricane. And this town where she lived was utterly decimated, just destroyed. Nobody, there were people, people going for the train. It was a little isolated swamp community, so it wasn't exactly in the best condition anyway for this kind of thing, right? But anyway, so this story has kind of sprung up, and I don't know, maybe like over the years, this woman has become this like vicious voodoo priestess that, wanted to destroy this town that had crossed her.
Right.
And we started researching this story and started finding her on census records and found her marriage certificate and finding information about her as a real human being, and started going through old newspaper articles and stuff like that. Really digging into who she is, again, as a human being, as opposed to this witch of folklore. And we put out an episode of that and did this research, and we kind of kept going with it and got really into it. And I work with research wise. My sister helps me do a lot of the research. She took that genealogy bug, and she's actually an archivist at the Louisiana State Museum now. So she's much smarter and able to access a little more of research than I am, and she kind of became obsessed with this story and went and actually got something published in one of these paranormal journals and all. And anyway, to get to the point though, so we got really obsessed with telling this woman's story and telling it not as this vicious or posing that maybe this woman wasn't this awful voodoo priestess after all. And almost every time that something, like in our first few years of growing as a podcast, it always surrounded her. It always, so we had this episode, we had someone contact us for a business deal, if you will, a business type thing,
right?
Contact us, and they're like, hey, we found your show, we think you're incredible, I blah 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 blah, and I want to work with you on this other thing. And we're like, oh, cool, great. What did you find? And he found that one. That was the
So,
one that tipped him over.
so
You
you're
know,
saying that a show that you're trying to depict a different side, someone who's been portrayed as a vicious voodoo priestess, you're showing a different, what could be a different side of that person, and something good is happening. Is that what I'm understanding?
yeah.
So you're
Whether it's serendipity or coincidence
Well,
or
no.
her
So
looking out
here's
for
the
us,
funny thing. I
you
think that
know?
it's almost the proof of, by you trying to prove that she is not a voodoo princess or priestess, is getting you good luck. I think that's actually proof that she is a voodoo priestess. I don't know why you want to keep calling her princess.
Well,
But that could
well,
be
you
that
know,
could
well,
be it.
here's the
It'd be like
thing.
she's like winking at you, going, "Okay, yeah, I'm not one of these. Here are good blessings for you."
Yeah. No, I mean, if she really did practice voodoo, there's a 99% chance. Well, I'd say, oh, we got that 90% chance that this was not a curse. This was like a, hey, y'all, this hurricane's coming. Y'all better get out of here.
So see,
You know?
that not freaks me out, but that is more concerning to me, like voodoo, than like something
Uh-huh.
haunted, because I know
Yeah.
that goes on and people are involved. And there was a movie, I don't remember what it was called, back in the 80s, that tied into voodoo, and it was very unsettling. That movie, it was a good horror movie. I don't remember the name of it, but anywho, I mean, so that kind of, that type of stuff does kind of not freak me out, because I think I would be more interested. Like literally, if things went
Yeah.
to hell in a handbasket, I would still be like, well, this is a great story. I mean, I'm not going to be around to tell it, but oh, my descendants are going to be able to tell this story. Here,
Yeah.
I
The
was
voodoo
right.
stuff, definitely.
I was writing this note as you were talking about you doing research and then your sister doing research, how she had really kind of latched onto this one story. And do you ever find the broadcast of a particular story anticlimactic? Meaning that, you almost don't want to broadcast it, because then you're not going to be researching anymore. You're not going to be thinking about it. You're moving on to the next thing. Have you found anything to be anticlimactic that you didn't want to end?
You know,
Or are you always ready to
well,
next?
you're pretty much, by the time you get to the point of, really putting something out, you're usually done with it to a certain extent, or at least in the sense of, if you're really going to research, um, there might be questions or something, but it's not something you're going to answer now,
Right.
and I think there are a handful that, I mean, we continue to look at stuff for, even though the episode's been out for over a year.
Right.
There's still stuff there, and and maybe they'll resurface in some way, but it's usually stuff that, to go to the next spot with research, you would have to do more anyway, whether that's, requesting documents that haven't been digitized yet, whether that's going and finding some books that are out of print, or something like that, or visiting a place or talking to some people. Usually we're able to at least get to a place before we publish an episode that, we've exhausted everything available, at least through a digital means, in the way we're doing the scope of it.
Well, so then
We have to be really,
follow up to that. Have you ever done an episode that you've had to go back and revisited because of new or different information coming to light, or you've never had to do that?
yeah. We have, but it's never been massive. It's always been like a kind of, oh, this. But the thing that's been the most, there's one story that just hands down, it's the Lake Lanier outside of Atlanta. It's this lake that's supposedly cursed. Okay, it's a man-made lake. Back in, oh gosh, I want to say 1955, the Chattahoochee River was dammed up by the Army Corps of Engineers to make this lake that was supposed to be, hydroelectric power and water source for Atlanta. Okay,
Uh-huh.
back in 50. And so today though, folks, when they hear Lake Lanier, they believe it's cursed because it's been the deadliest lake in the country. Like over 700 deaths have happened on this lake since its creation. Still to this day, I mean, every summer I have a Google alert for it. every summer, I mean, 5 to 10 people are dying on that lake for whether it's boating accidents, drowning, something like that.
Right.
And over the course of time, we've had things where, people talked about it like people would say that, they get pulled out of the lake by, by a lifeguard or something and say it felt like they were getting pulled into the lake. And it's fascinating because there's like an underwater ghost town underneath it, and to an extent, and anyway, so it said this lake's been cursed for years and years and years. And the reason for a very long time they said it was cursed was because when the Army Corps of Engineers, the government purchased all this poor farming land, that they didn't move some cemeteries, and they built this lake over cemeteries and didn't move the bodies. Okay, and that's why it's cursed. Well, this was kind of the story when we were researching it. It was back in like 2018. We're researching it. A TV show came out, one of those like Discovery Channel ones with Josh Gates, where he's got like scuba divers going under there, and they're looking at headstones under the water in the lake and all. And this is why it's cursed, right? Well, what ends up happening is more information comes out and kind of hits the mainstream, and folks start to learn a little bit more. One of the places that are under the lake was a town called Oscarville. All right. And Oscarville, back in 1912, I believe. So you're talking 40 years before the lake was even made. Oscarville was a primarily black town. And there was a large lynching there in 1912. And a lot of the people in that county ran all of the black people out of the county. Okay, it was Forsyth County, and completely made it a sundown area, everything, right?
Right.
Full just racial reckoning at that point, right? So a book came out that was discussing Oscarville. In the process of this book, nowhere in the book does it discuss Lake Lanier or anything else, but it talks about Oscarville. Folks know Oscarville's out there. So what we started to see all of a sudden was in like 2021, folks started talking about, well, hey, that lake, there's no longer are we worried about cemeteries. Now everybody's saying that lake's so deadly because of what happened in Oscarville. So you're kind of like can watch in real time as this kind of story kind of unfolds and kind of, evolves in and of itself. And in some ways, even we end up feeling like we were a part of it too, because we've presented this one spot here. This is what the story was in 2018, 2019, and then here we are, a few years later, and it's a completely different story.
Right.
And it's just evolved over that time. And I think that kind of stuff, at some point, it was such a popular episode. At some point, we do have to readdress it. It's something like I keep my eye on because it's a very American myth. It's growing. It's changing almost like monthly at this point, how much this legend, because it's starting to pop up in TV shows now, even like a couple of, the TV show Atlanta had it in an episode.
Really?
And so now here's even this 100% fictional, TV show talking about this curse and kind of making its own story with it, because this fictional TV show doesn't even have to be 100% accurate.
Right.
And that's probably swaying more people's minds, than any nonfiction book or anything else you might read. So it's been.
Do you know, did the TV show do it? Did the TV show do it justice, like the curse, or did they get things?
Yeah,
okay. Well, I didn't want it to be like a case
thing.
of telephone where, they start telling and everyone starts telling the wrong story because the loudest voice is telling it incorrectly. So they did a good job of telling.
It is like a telephone. I mean, it is telephone. I mean, they did a good job based on what they had.
Right.
I think inevitably that's what this is what you're watching, is you are watching telephone. And it's the same thing that I think happened to somebody like my voodoo priestess, Julia Brown. I think she wasn't one in 1915, but by the time you get her on, Ghost Adventures or whatever TV show in 2010, 2015, boom, that game of telephone has taken off down there in the bayou, right?
Right.
And that's what we're kind of watching with Lake Lanier. You see the changes in YouTube episodes and how people just start focusing on different aspects of it, and start looking at it differently, and then it kind of evolves, and it grows. But I tell people like that one right there, Lake Lanier. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been to Georgia or anything, but if you're on a lake in Georgia, that's a hold my beer lake.
Yeah.
I don't know I don't know how paranormal this lake is.
Yeah.
I've been boating with it.
I gone back and forth. I'm originally from Florida. I've driven back and forth, and there have been times where I'll stop in Georgia. And it was funny because I remember once I was driving down there. My wife's like, "Where are you?" And I'm like, I'm stopped at some Chick-fil-A and somewhere in Georgia. And I go, "Hold on." She goes, "What was that?" And I go, "Well, I'm just trying to understand what these people are saying." She goes, "Are they not speaking English?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm pretty sure they're speaking English, but I don't understand a word they're saying." So it can be like a total, it's Georgia, their way of life down there, like you say, it is a hold my beer lake. It's just a different way of life, which is fine.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I'm just wondering if something overtly happened to me, whether I would identify it. It seems that no matter how high my IQ is, I still sometimes get dumbfounded. Like my wife and I were in Palm Springs one time when what's the locals said was they thought it was a very strong earthquake. I think it was like 4.6 or 4.8, which doesn't sound, but for the locals, that's not just a little shaking. But it was funny because my wife's always been from the Midwest. I was from Florida and then the Midwest. So I don't have any reference to earthquakes, but we stood there for what seemed like 20 or 30 seconds, just shaking. And then when the earth stopped, my wife and I looked at each other and said, "What was that?" It couldn't have been anything but an earthquake, but I'm kind of afraid that I may be in a situation like that where something paranormal will happen, but I'm not smart enough to recognize what's actually happening while I'm in the moment.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah. I mean, and
I
that's,
don't give myself that much faith either.
yeah. And my other fear is that because I am a cannabis consumer and there are strains that can cause you to be like, I don't think I've ever got full on paranoid, but I guess I have. I mean, I'm trying to think, no, I haven't. And then I think about, oh, well, if you hear a sound and you're like, what was that? I guess that's kind of, but I don't want my personal, I don't want to read something into it that's not there as well. I mean, I think organically may not be the right term either, but just, I will tell you this. I wish I could remember the name of that stinking hotel in downtown Denver. But anyway, they had the skeleton keys is what you had for the room. No fancy swiping of a card or anything. Skeleton keys on these really fancy, like leather keychains. In fact, whenever you left, even if you're just going out to eat, you had to check your keychain in because they didn't want people to steal them. So this is where they had the ghost tours and everything. And I remember my wife and I were leaving. I think we were checking out of the hotel. So we're walking down this long hallway and it's very like Shining-esque. It's very long. It's wider than what we're used to nowadays, and all the doors looked exactly the same, and not current doors. Like these were, obviously from a time of yesteryear. And it was funny because right as we're walking by a door, a handle started rattling.
Like, you're not talking about the Stanley Hotel, are you?
No. So that one's in Estes Park. Yeah, and I can't, and I should, because if I look it up, it's going to make me mad. Let's see. I'm actually going to haunted hotel in downtown Denver, because I even remember the stinking keychains. Let's see, downtown Denver.
Yeah.
The Oxford Hotel. So it's the Oxford. So I think if I remember the history correctly, it is the oldest hotel oldest continuously running hotel on the west side of the Mississippi.
Huh.
I feel like
That's
that's a stretch because that's a pretty bold statement, but it had some sort of big statement. But it's called the Oxford Hotel, and it's in lower downtown Denver. And it was a cool place, but I would like to experience more of, try to immerse myself. Like I never took the time to just sit there and try to feel any energy or something like that. And I don't,
right.
unlike you, I don't have an EMF in my pocket or the, what was the other one again? The prayer, not a prayer box,
Spirit box.
the spirit box. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't have those. I'm not saying that I will next time we visit Denver, but I may. Who knows? That may be something I don't know if I can order those on Amazon or not, but if I can, that may be going with me to the Oxford Hotel. Because
I'll do it.
yeah, so that was that would be an interesting place. It was just funny because we're walking down and rattle, 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 and you know, you mentioned the Stanley. I remember going there as a kid, and so I don't think it really got to me because I'm thinking that The Shining came out about 1980. I don't think I saw The Shining in the theater. I think my parents probably would not let a 13-year-old boy watch The Shining. So I think that when we visited the hotel, I kind of knew about the movie and some of the history, but I wasn't like now.
Yeah.
If I went, I'd be like, oh, I remember this, or this was portrayed differently, or whatever the case may be. But I don't even think I had a point of reference back then. What is your next big, if you can even give us a hint, big story or big target? What is the next big thing that you want to research and delve into?
I don't really have a giant one that I'm looking at in the future, and we kind of have just this list of ones, and usually
Well, I guess
don't
let me
realize
ask
big
you
a
this
deal.
then, since you don't have that
Mhm.
with your list, where do you get that list? Are these ones that you develop yourself? Are they sourced by your listeners? How do you find out about certain topics?
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything. I definitely get a lot of people will reach out to us. I travel a lot. I mean, I pretty much I try and leave the house at least once a month. Get out of town and look up places. I have a fairly large library of books now, of ghost books. So you kind of find it a lot of places. It pretty much, if you go looking for one topic, you end up finding 5 or 6 more things,
Right.
and it's just kind of grown on it over time. And it just kind of gets vet based on, how much information's there and how big it is, how real. But, we tend to, I prefer to find smaller stories rather than big stories. I've always really enjoyed finding one of those stories that might be on like a local ghost tour, but hasn't ever been on a TV show or anything.
Right.
And it might be a great story that if it wasn't, if it was not for this local community keeping it alive through tourism, no one would ever hear about it. Maybe there's like a self-published book that
Right.
outlined it or some small regional print, but I really enjoy those.
So
So it's a good bit of just kind of digging around.
I told you this before we hit the record button that I like to go, that although I do have notes, that I tend to go way off topic. And part of this, as you were talking about the way that you source some topics, what is the strangest way you ever learned about something that ended up being a show that you had never heard from before? Like you overheard it at a coffee shop, or a pigeon dropped an old newspaper clipping somehow, or so. What's the weirdest or most interesting way you found out about a story?
Oh man, I don't know. I don't know if I have a weird one really.
And I don't know if
well, I
that.
have one. The oddest one, the one that really fits the bill of like no one else probably heard of this story unless you live there, is I have some really good friends that are in the music world, and one day we were sitting around hanging out and made a comment about how they would love to play something as like a soundtrack theme thing or whatever, right? Like
Right.
is a married couple, and my friend, is incredible country guitar player, incredible guitar player. He, but his wife, as incredible as a player as he is, his wife is just like, I mean, just she's a harpist. Like she's played like on stage with Beyonce and played at like the White House like several times. I mean, just this incredible, was like a child prodigy.
Right.
And she's a harpist. Anyway, so we're goofing off like, man, it was like, well, wouldn't it be cool if I could find a ghost harpist? And then maybe we could, do an episode. And sure enough, man, I found this wild story out by Cape Fear, Wilmington, North Carolina, of this small house, or this not small house, but this house that was like an inn for a very long time. And apparently this guy died, and he was a harp player for the house band. There's a really interesting story about how this guy made his way down to Wilmington. And basically this house, though, since then, this was published in like maybe 2 regional books and a newspaper article here or there, had some information about it. But the house is now a private house. So like this story is no longer even getting told or anything.
Right.
So it was kind of it was really entertaining because it was a story I never would have found anyway. I basically just went looking for something that might fit this bill. It turned out to be a really interesting, great little story to research, on top of the fact that like there's no way I would have found this had I not been looking for the specific topic, because it would be it's so far from really ever hitting
Right.
a broader, anyway. So
well, yeah,
that's been like the most fun way.
I was gonna say, at my age, I'm 55, and I have yet to hear a ghost harpist story to this point. So, I under what you're saying, that it's just not everywhere that you turn and look to.
No.
Yeah. Okay. So you've been doing this podcast for a while. I was gonna ask you this very early on, and now I'm asking you at the end. Do you do anything pre-game? And this is a podcast. This has nothing to do. Well, actually, I can't make that statement for you. For me, my pregame routine before doing an episode does not involve ghost. So I don't know if yours do or not, but do you do anything like before we got on? Like I always have nervous energy, so I listen to music, and I probably, I call it dancing. My kids would probably not call it that, but that's not the point. I'm just getting rid of it. So do you do anything prior to your episodes, either when you're a guest on someone else's show or during your own show? Do you have a routine that you do?
It depends on the time of the day. I tend to record my show early in the day, since it's just me. It's a narrative show. It seems to be when I can have the most focus and kind of dial in, and I sound better. But if I'm doing an interview, this evening I didn't really have to pregame too much with you, but if it's early in the day, sometimes I will call a friend and just talk to a friend for a little while, for about 15 minutes, because like trying to make sure that my brain works for adults, if that makes sense.
It does.
I got kids too, right? So, it's like, I drop my kids off at school or something, you come home and maybe I'm working for a little while and I haven't spoken to anyone. And then it's like, all right, well, at 11 o'clock, I'm going to go on this other guy's show, and it's like, I haven't spoken to another person in hours. Like maybe I need to warm this up. So that seems to be one of my kind of rituals of, make sure my brain is working, that I'm in a jovial mood, I guess.
That makes a lot more sense than doing what I'm doing. I should probably that seems to make a lot more sense. So, okay.
But, I don't get anxiety over it though anymore. I did for a while, and now it's just, it's fun. This is fun. You do it enough, and it works. Whether it's good or bad. So,
and I'm so glad that you came on the podcast, because just hearing about what you're doing, for me, from a podcasting standpoint, listening to the show that you put out, it is very polished. It is very nice. I think that was the first thing I mentioned to my wife when I was listening to one of your episodes. Oh, I got a button for that. So, but I mean, I very much enjoy having you on and being able to talk, because I haven't talked to anyone about that. I mean, my family, if I was to bring up ghosts or ghost stories, I don't think that they would engage with me. I think they would nod and just they wouldn't engage. In fact, there's a place, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, with the amount of research that you've done, but in Excelsior Springs, Missouri, which is north of Kansas City, called the Elms Hotel, and it's supposed to be very haunted. So but we've talked about staying there. They have a spa that we've been to before, which is very nice, but it is kind of that, kind of a Stanley vibe. I mean, when you're inside, you know, it's not from this century. I mean, you just, it just has that feel about it and that look about it. They've updated it, but then not that much. And we've talked about staying there, but my wife's hesitant just because of the history. And it's funny because, now that I think about it, it's funny because she won't sleep in a hotel room that she thinks might be haunted, but sleeping in a shared Airbnb where someone's down the hall, that's okay.
Yeah,
I just thought about that. I'm gonna have to point that out because I'm not. Let's just say they're both equally as dangerous. I'm not gonna say one is more dangerous than the other, but if I had to choose, it would not be the ghost. That's not who I'd be, because that's another story. But it is funny how, do you run into it? I was about to wrap this up, but I came up with one more question. Do you run into a lot of people that once they hear what you do, that they have a story for you? I mean, is there a good amount of people who go, "Oh, I have something for you"?
Yeah, I mean, I say that I know everybody's weirdest day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, it's as soon as somebody knows what you do and they feel comfortable, it's like all of a sudden they can let their guard down. And some of the people that I would just assume would be the biggest skeptics or would think it's total BS or something, will just give me some of the wildest stories sometimes.
Have you ever been like, you can stop talking, your lips can stop? I mean, have you ever been like, have you always wanted that story, or have you been like, I don't want to hear this, Susan?
I mean, sometimes they're a little out there. Some of them, like, honestly, the people, the stories I don't like listening to the most are the ones that, like, they're super nerdy ghost hunter guys that, it feels very embellished.
Right.
I don't mind hearing the kind of random, somebody knows what you do and they work an office job and have a regular life and they're like, oh my God, I need to tell you about what happened in my house. Like,
the
that's
whisper.
Kind of entertaining, like all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, but so yeah, I mean, I enjoy that. It's interesting, and I think it's been fascinating because it's just it shows that everybody, this is not, this what you see on the Travel Channel with ghost adventures and ghost hunters and all the wackadoos. A lot more people believe this stuff than you might think.
Well, and I think that's what is surprising and why people accept my wife's story. Because if we were standing in a room of 100 people and someone said, tell us who you 100% this person's going to have a ghost story, they would point to me. Whether they thought it was true or not, that'd be a different thing. But to my wife, they'd be like, there's no way that she has but yet she does. And that's why, like, so when she says that, like when I'm telling all the details, the intricate details of my interaction with this ghost, and they're denying that I had this interaction. And then my wife's like, no, it happened. They're like, oh, really, Bobby? Tell us more. And I'm like, really? Come on. So it is what it is. But it just, I mean, I get some weird stories, but mine are, because of I don't understand to this day. The title of my show is The Stone Genius. It's me. It's no one else. I mean, like if you go on the Joe Rogan show, you are not Joe or Rogan. You are not the Joe Rogan show. You're not, because a lot of people, I don't know if I can be on your show because the word stone's in it. And I'm like, why do you guys always forget about genius? Genius is also in the title, but no one ever thinks about, I mean, no one ever thinks about that. So they always, so I get some weird stories too. I just don't get the weird ghost stories, but I think I am going to solicit those now because
Yeah.
for good or for bad, and I will say for good for the most part, I hear from a lot of the listeners. They like to give me feedback or, oh, you should talk more about this or go down this. I'm sure that I will hear from some of our listeners about stories they have. And they may have some stories that are so good that they'll be passed along. Now, okay. So I will eventually let you go probably. Do you try on your, here's my other question. I promise this will probably maybe be the last. When you're doing a show, do you typically want to visit the site or can you do everything from a distance?
I wish I could, but it's just impossible for
Okay.
everything,
So
Just
because I know that you do
with the
mostly,
level, yeah.
I know that you do mostly in the southern United States because that's geographically where you were located and where you grew up. But I was thinking
Yeah.
this as I'm saying this, that we have a lot of international listeners, and I just wonder because of the towns that some of these people that I've talked to and know the age of them, they may have stories, and so I didn't know if you ever delved into stories that may not be as geographically near you as what you're used to doing.
Yeah, I mean, I do stay southern, but I mean, it's a pretty wide,
Right.
I mean, I do stuff up in West Virginia and Arkansas and all, and I'm pretty centrally located. Again, I mean, I make it out to a lot of spots, and I will, and we've done, I don't know, about over 100 episodes. I'm not quite sure, 125 episodes at this point, and I couldn't visit them all, but
Right.
I've been to a lot. I really have. Some of it's after the fact. I don't make it out to the East Coast much. So I'm going to be out in Charleston at the end of July here. But I don't. It's Savannah and Charleston's kind of a stretch. I mean, anything that's in Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana is fairly easy for me. I end up traveling down to New Orleans a good bit with family, and so I take a lot of detours and I'll kind of bop around that way. But as you kind of go up north, I'll hit Kentucky stuff fairly regularly. But getting up into Virginia and some of the Carolinas and all, it's a little too far
Right.
for the amount of time. So I wish I could. It brings a whole new perspective when you get to go there and really feel it, as I said, and see a place.
Well, I am so glad that you that came on the program. I hope that sometime in the future that you could be on again because generally what happens is as soon as I'm done with an episode, then I spend the next amount of time writing questions that I would have asked. And one of them, I'm not asking it now. But I mean, one thing that I became curious about because as a genius, one thing that I identify very easily or generally do is the pattern. So I would just be curious because we were talking about the genealogy part, whether there would be a pattern of families that may be haunted. Because because I started thinking about this when I'd mentioned, I have people that listen overseas, I was thinking Louisiana, where you grew up, is a lot of French influence. I know that I know people that listen in France. I just wonder, whether certain lines of people, and that's probably something you're not even interested in. But I would be interested if there's information out there on whether certain families are more haunted, not necessarily their house, but say, the Smiths, their house down the street, and their son that lives in Seattle, haunted, and their daughter that lives in Louisville, haunted. I just wonder whether there's certain families would do that. So, okay. So, well, hey, Brandon, thank you so much for being on the program. I very much appreciate it. It was great to get to know you and talk about your podcast and what you do. I mean, not only for me, I got to learn a little bit on the podcasting side of it, but love learning about the program that you have. And I've been very interested. I've been listening to the last few episodes. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you for having me on, Ro.
Oh, you're so welcome. And for everyone, the podcast is called Southern Gothic, the podcast. You can find that everywhere, correct, Brandon? Is that correct?
Yep, everywhere you get your podcast.
Okay. Okay, that's awesome. So, hey, Brandon, thank you again for being on the show. Everyone else, thank you for listening to the program. You guys know me. My name's Ro. I'm the Stone Genius. Till next time, talk to y'all later. Bye.